My daughter was born in China. She has a birth mother, she has me, and she has another mother too. We received our daughters in a hotel conference room in Guangdong province in the year 2000. These shell-shocked little babies had ridden on a bus for hours to be transferred into our arms after a quick diaper change. They were too young to understand what was happening, unable to voice their confusion beyond desperate cries or catatonic stares. From time to time, they craned their little necks to look over our shoulders at the orphanage personnel who had brought them to us, reaching out with tiny hands toward the women standing around the room's perimeter. And here's what I was thinking. You have a mother now. Look at me, little girl. I'm your mama. Beyond the theoretical, I hadn't thought too much about the aunties, the women who had cared for our daughter during her first year of life. I was wrapped up in preparing for a long trip to China and wondering how I could leave my 5-year-old son behind while I went halfway around the world. I knew they were important. I knew they had a hard job. And I knew they had kept her safe and alive until we could come and get her. They were the means to my end, and in all honesty, I hadn't thought about what it might feel like for them. They were the women who had loaded our little babies onto the bus in the morning and gone back to their day's work with the remaining children. We were fortunate enough to visit the orphanage the day after we met our babies, being the first ever foreigners allowed inside. Upon our arrival at the Lianxiang Social Welfare Institute, we were ushered into a conference room, offered tea and a local fruit called dragon's eyes. As we sat around a large table listening to speeches of goodwill and nation-to-nation commitment, a swarm of Chinese aunties suddenly swooped into the room and scooped up the babies who they had just the day before released to their new lives. I can just picture these women anxiously waiting outside the doors, desperate to see the little girls they had held, fed, changed, washed, sung to. It's not hard to imagine that longing, that ache in their arms. Of course, one of these women was there for our daughter. She rushed to our baby, picked her up, and cried as she held her close. She firmly patted her face, her hair, her arms, as if to reassure herself that this precious child had returned. What was she thinking when she realized who we were? Was she relieved? Was she sad? Did she want her back? What was she thinking? Our shared baby happily settled into her auntie's arms, quiet and clearly relieved to be back in the place she knew, with its familiar sights, sounds, and smells around her. Their eyes met as she drank her bottle of rice cereal and formula, her auntie's tears dropping onto her little face. Their bond was evident and tangible. Here was this gentle woman fiercely holding our daughter and nuzzling her face in the last short time they had. What must that feel like? Was it harder since she'd probably already done it once, as she packed her into the bus that would take her away? Through my meager grasp of the Chinese language and the use of universal gestures, we asked this special woman to write our daughter a message on a piece of hotel stationery. At first she didn't want to, but we persisted. As she sat writing and crying, my husband videotaped this intimate moment. Can you imagine anyone taping you while you write a letter to a child you love, knowing it will very likely be your very last communication? How can one say all that is in her heart when given so little time and such a small piece of paper? What a how nuer, Zhongguo mama ju sing fu kwai le, Hanita sin mama baba, kwai le, kwai gao zhang da, Zhongguo mama. My dear daughter, your Chinese mama wishes you happiness with your new mama and daddy. I know you will have a good life. Your Chinese mama. So you see, my daughter has me, and she has her birth mother. She has another mother too, her Chinese auntie, who loved her with all the intensity of a mother's love. I sometimes go back and look at pictures from that day. There we are in the conference room. There is our daughter in her auntie's arms. There we are outside as a smiling group, our daughter's beloved auntie standing right next to us. I'd know that face anywhere, and I've seen it since in pictures from other families who have adopted from this same orphanage. How many children has she sent into the world? To how many children has she whispered these words? Be happy, have a good life, remember me.